Hi, I'm Shannon Grissom. Are you looking to ignite your creativity? Or how about be inspired by a steady stream of muses? Welcome to Painterly Life, the podcast that celebrates those who create, inspire, and innovate. So whether you're looking to spark your next big idea, reignite your passion, or simply soak in some creative energy, this is the place for you. Painterly Life, where every guest is a new muse just for you. Welcome to the Painterly Life podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Grissom. Today's guest is fabulous glass artist Caroline Masters. She is guided by curiosity and a love of experimentation. Caroline creates kiln-formed glass art that captures the movement of light, gravity, and transformation. They're magical. Welcome, Caroline.
Thank you, Shannon. It's a pleasure to be here.
You know, you grew up with an architect, designer mother, and an engineer father. So how did that shape your creativity growing up?
Well, I was always encouraged to do art, which was wonderful because I was into whether it was construction toys or figure paint or anything. And I had two brothers. So we all enjoyed doing that together. But basically, my father was a very talented engineer and inventor. So he had a workshop that we got to watch what he was doing. And my mother was actually the third woman to graduate from Harvard's Architecture and Design School, which was highly unusual. So, and she was an artist and designer. And so there was always interesting things going on. So that just, to me, it was just completely natural to be doing creative things. It wasn't so much art, but just creative activities.
You know, it just sounds amazing and so empowering. I was thinking about you and growing up in the Cape Cod area. I know you were deeply influenced by the tide pools. I too have actually been deeply influenced by the Cape Cod painters. So tell me a little bit about that.
Well, some of my earliest memories are being on this beautiful white sand beach, and there were these rocky areas with the tide pools and starfish and all kinds of amazing things. And of course, we always tried to capture the minnows in the shallows, you know, with our nets, which they were almost faster than we were. But that just, I guess I was always a water baby, you know, doing that. And I swam like a fish from an early age. So
you're experimental now. Did that start at an early age as well? Did you always start playing with things?
Oh, yes. Whatever material I was introduced to, I would try. I mean, I remember doing things like linoleum carving when I was quite young. I even had a scar on my hand because I didn't pay attention when you're supposed to always have your hand behind where you're. I learned that the hard way. And I remember in high school doing this construction that involved styrofoam and wood dowels and cement. And I discovered how I was always trying to work large. So yeah, and learning the limitations of certain materials.
So how did you make this transition from all the different things that you tried? How did you end up in glass?
Oh, no, that's an interesting story. Actually, I didn't know about the studio glass movement at all when I was in college and art school and later, because that started late 60s, 70s, etc. I was here in the San Francisco Bay Area and attending art festivals, weekend art fairs, and things like that. And I had seen a piece, a slumped glass rectangular tray at a woman's booth, and it had this beautiful dark blue sort of veils on over clear in the center of the piece. I asked her, "What's that?" And she said, "Bullseye." And I said, "What's bullseye?" And it turns out that Bullseye Glass, which was started by 3 hippie glass artists in the 1970s up in Portland, Oregon,
Love it.
they were going strong. And so it's their material that she said, and they had just opened a resource center here in the Bay Area in Emeryville the year before. So that enabled me to start taking workshops and classes, which I did, I took like 20 workshops and classes in the next 3 years between 2014 and 2016.
Wow. So
when I get into something, I really get into it. So.
Well, I mean, how could you not, right? I mean, so you work with a number of glass forms. I don't know anything about glass. Can you tell us about that?
Oh, okay. Yes. Most people are familiar with glass from stained glass, because stained glass, like stained glass windows in churches, etc., that's been going on for over 1,000 years. With fused glass, which is relatively new, maybe 30 to 40 years, because the reason why you have stained glass with leading in between the colors and then painting on the glass for the images is because people have been trying for 1,000 years to put the different colors of glass, which have different chemistries and different coefficient of expansion, to put those all together in a kiln, heat it up and melt it, and not have it explode. Okay. So they've been trying to do this for 1,000 years, and it took really the Bullseye gang through a lot of experiments and trial and error to figure out how to do this. Basically, being able to put all these colors together and fuse it in a kiln and have it be stable is a relatively new phenomenon. So it's actually a growing medium. And I love it because I trained as a sculptor printmaking and drawing. So these 3-dimensional constructions I create that melt down to make the discs is really part of a whole 3-dimensional sculptural process, even though what I end up with is not as thick. But there's, and I've also been studying with the international glass artist Narcissus Qualiata, and he has an online community he's created because he started going online during the pandemic, like so many people did, and was very successful in putting courses together to pass on his 50-year knowledge of glass. And he started in stained glass because there was no fused glass when he started in glass. And then he worked with Bullseye actually in the 80s and 90s in helping them develop the work, that the different materials. Now, you asked about the different forms. There's sheet, and then they crush the glass to make different sizes of what's called frit, which is basically crushed glass. Okay. And then they have a powder form, which you have to wear a respiratory mask definitely when you're working with this. You do not want to breathe in glass powder. It's not a good thing. No. So you have to be careful. But the powders, you can actually draw and do amazing things with the powders. And then there are rods, which are thicker, and then stringers, which are thinner in different widths. And then those are and billets. Billets are like 3/4 of an inch thick, so like a rectangular thing. So I cut those up and use them as pillars, supports in these wedding cake type constructions that I create that melt down. So I'm using all these forms of glass and throwing in things like silver foil to get these silver elements in the pieces as well. So I actually use, I think, pretty much all the different forms of Bullseye. Okay, that's the other thing. I'm only using Bullseye glass because the COE of their materials are all designed to work together, so that they have an R&D department and education department, so they're making sure all the batches of glass that they provide are guaranteed to be within a certain range, and so that they will work well with the other glasses. So I know when I put something in a kiln, it's not going to explode, at least not for that reason.
Yeah, I was wondering if you chose things based on chemical composition in addition to the aesthetic value of what you're working on. But
Yes, I mean, there are certain glasses that have different chemical properties. For instance, there's the sulfur glasses and the copper glasses, and then lead-based ones. And there's certain ones like the copper and sulfur. Like copper tend to be the blues,
mm,
blues and purples, and the sulfur or like the yellow, reds, and oranges, and some of the greens. And when you combine certain ones of those together and they touch each other in the kiln, they actually react and they cause other colors.
oh,
So,
how cool.
and you don't know ahead of time exactly what it's going to do. So
Ooh.
it's always amazing. It's like, baking when you really don't know if it's going to work or not.
Oh, how fun. So how do you embrace, I started off as a super control freak on my when I was
Oh my.
first started painting. I've totally loosened up since then, but how do you work with, or you just have to offer it up that you can't control it?
Well, yeah, again, because of my art training and background, I know a lot about the color wheel and complementary and contrasting colors and that. And I've been working with the Bullseye glasses for long enough and they have created their own color wheel in recent years so
Oh,
that you can actually have a wheel that is using their exact colors. I mean, as far as you can translate from three-dimensional into a two-dimensional form.
yeah.
So you can plan. So sometimes I will use secondary colors, like I will use green, orange, and purple, violet. So I start with that kind of a setup, or I like working a lot with blues and aquas and greens and throwing in white and silver. So I have colorways that I'm using from my background. And in design, I often like to use tripartite symmetry, which is 3. So I will do something where I have, and now this is all in the constructions. Now, when it melts down, a lot of changes happen in the disc process. I mean, I also do other things, like I've started doing portraiture in glass, where
Oh, wow.
you can actually paint with these glass enamels. And the glass enamels are very finely crushed glass with a binder. So you're
Wow.
using these beautiful long tail brushes and you're painting with that, and then it's being fused in the kiln. And
Whoa. That's super cool.
so I gave you one of the images of the lady in blue. So you can combine imagery that you have painted with all these wonderful colors of glass.
Wow.
Yeah.
That just opens up a whole new world of possibilities.
It does, and I've only just started experimenting with it. So, and yeah, it's an amazing. So there's so many different things you can do. I mean, glass. I'm doing primarily fusing, but for your audience to understand, there is cold glass, which is basically stained glass, where you're not heating up anything, but you're using leading between the glass. There's fused glass or kiln glass, which is also called warm glass, because you're putting it in a kiln at around 1500 degrees Fahrenheit. I mean, it can be a little higher or lower depending on what you're doing. And then there's hot glass, like people know the show Blown Away.
Oh, yeah.
And that's how a lot of people know about glass these days. You're using, you're blowing glass, and it's much hotter, 2000, 2200 degrees. And with that's a team sport, and you have to keep moving all the time and putting it in and out of the glory hole to keep it hot while you're working it, and then you have to anneal it afterwards. But what I like about kiln glass, which I'm doing, putting things in a kiln, I can do it myself. I can be in the middle of a project and I can say, well, I'm not really sure what I want to do next. And I can walk away and come back later and complete it. if you're doing hot glass or flame working, which is making beads and things where you're working with a flame, you have to keep going. You can't
just
you
stop.
can't say, well, I'm not sure what I want to do next. Yeah.
Yeah, that's, and I would say some of that is, I think about lifestyle or just your situation at home, whether you have time in the studio where you can go in and not be disturbed, you would be better, or you would be able to work with that type of scenario. Somebody like me that has limited time to put into different things, it would be better to, it would be, the kiln is doable for me. So that's,
Absolutely. I mean, people can have, for instance, I have a relatively small kiln at home, Paragon Benchtop 16. Basically, it runs on household current.
Okay.
So it's only 16 by 16 inches by 6 inches deep on the inside. So I can do things up to like 10 by 12, 13 by 13 inches flat in there. All my major pieces, my tables and discs and the large shallow bowls, I do those at the Bullseye Studio, their resource center, which is now in Alameda, because they have all the larger kilns. And they have the cold working shop, because you have to polish everything afterwards if you're have a process that involves that. And they of course have all the supplies there. So if I run out of anything, I can get it right there. And it's a very smart business model. They have several resources centers around the country, because you're not only purchasing their material, but once you've taken classes with them, then you can use what they call open studios. And I have a frequent fuser card with them. So they're enabling people to actually get involved and use this before purchasing equipment and things at home. But without their resource center and the classes and visiting artist workshops that I did several years ago, I wouldn't be doing glass, because it's the access to, it's not the capability, the access to the tools and equipment and the teaching. And I found that in workshops, you learn as much from the other students as you do from the teacher, which is why I love taking workshops.
Well, I was thinking that it has to be a tremendous sense of community, even just going down there and working on your own pieces, meeting with the other artists, seeing what they're doing, on top of all the workshops. I mean, what a great experience. I mean, you're lucky to have, so how many facilities do they have across the United States?
They have 5. Up, of course, in Portland, Oregon, where their factory is. And I got to, I took a trip on vacation in August and went up to Oregon. So I got a tour of the factory and met with some of my glass friends up there. It was really quite amazing. And they are open to the public. You have to reserve a spot, but to do a tour, which is quite an amazing situation. And they're here in the Bay Area, down in Pasadena in Southern California, and Santa Fe, and just outside of New York City.
Wow.
As well. But they serve glass artists around the world. Yeah. But I recommend, if people want to try out glass, find in their area, there are glass studios all over the country that give classes, both introductory classes and more advanced. Take an introductory class. I mean, there's even weekend, just evening situations, or an afternoon situation on a weekend where you can try it out, where they do all the heavy lifting for you, or you can make a plate, or you can make something fun. At Bullseye, they allow people, they make little snowflakes with the frit. So there's ways of experimenting and trying it out, and seeing if you like it. And it's really a growing field, I think.
Well, I want to play now. It sounds like fun. So, we've talked, and you mentioned that photographs and even some video doesn't really capture the magic of your pieces. Can you do you have any that you can show me?
Yes. Well, here, to give you an idea, this is a piece, and this is about 16 inches. This is kind of egg shaped, because I actually, it was thicker, and then I put it back in the kiln and let it melt just to a larger shape. glass, it wants to be 6 millimeters thick, which is about a 1/4 inch. So this is a little bit of the science. If you just put some chunks of glass in the kiln and heat it to full fuse, it will flow out to it. So it's a 1/4 inch thick. And that's what it wants to do. If you want it to be thicker, as many of my pieces are, you have to put dams around it to contain it, because it's going to get like molasses or honey at the temperatures you're fusing, and it's just going to flow, and it'll flow all over the place if you don't contain it. But at 6 mil, it will do this. So this is my process. This was actually the original piece was done in my little kiln at home, and then I floated out at Bullseye. But you can see that is real silver in there.
Wow.
Because silver foil, I discovered, when you sandwich it between sheets of glass, and then the glass will flow and the silver breaks apart in what I call silver rain. So I discovered that in a class early on, and then I've been experimenting with it ever since. So that's fun. And then there are this piece, and you can see there is actually no black in this piece. That is all reaction between the turquoise. You can see the turquoise color, turquoise, which is a copper bearing glass. And I believe I had something called a reactive ice. There are some glasses that Bullseye has that it looks clear or white, and they will react with the copper glasses. So this was a piece that was first fused flat, and then I slumped it over a form to make this shape. And it's about, so, and I just had a lot of fun, and this was actually a multiple process. It was fused into a block, then it was cut up into chunks, and then all the chunks were arranged in a circle, and then I fused it flat. So it's a little bit complicated, but I just wanted to show this as the what you can do with the piece. And here's just a little piece to see. These little circles were something called vitrograph. You can have a small kiln that's up high with a pot of hot glass in it with a hole in the center, and you pull the glass down and you make something called marini. And these were little cut sections and then arranged together and fused. I'm sorry I hope it's not too complicated.
It's not, I was thinking back to the one with the form. What's the material you put in the kiln that can withstand that? What kind of form do you use?
There are ceramic molds.
Okay.
Ceramic slumping molds. So that's one thing you can use. There's also, you can use something, a stainless steel mesh. This was done with the wavy form, putting some ceramic pieces for the structure, and then bending this stainless steel, very fine stainless steel mesh over it in this form, and then it slumped over it. So the stainless steel, of course, withstands much hotter temperatures than the glass. And ceramics, like many people don't realize, when you're firing ceramics, clay things, you're often going to much higher temperatures, 1800, 2000, 2200 degrees. And a full fuse of Bullseye glass is only around 1500 degrees Fahrenheit.
Oh, okay.
So
a lot of that can withstand that.
Oh, yes.
So I know you've experimented with some non-traditional components in your work. I love how you're always pushing it. You're always experimenting and trying. So tell me about some of these non-traditional components that end up in your work.
Okay, I have a background in the medical device industry. I mean, I've always been working in some form of consultative sales, business-to-business consultative sales. So because I had experience in medical device, and I, not that long ago, was in custom U.S. manufacturing. So I was going to trade shows like medical device trade shows. There are manufactured components in like copper and they stamp them out so they're thin, and they use these in the manufacture of medical devices. And many of the companies that would be on the show floor at a conference and trade show would have samples.
Oh,
So
wow.
I knew that I couldn't use mixed metals because of the outgassing in the kiln. So if something was pure copper, and I'm sorry, I have it in the other room. Sorry, I didn't
It's
think to bring it,
okay.
but you can use, like, other artists use copper sheet that they cut up and fuse into the glass and make images of animals and different things. It can be very beautiful, like a trout in copper fused into the glass. But I used some of these pieces from the medical device that had very interesting, like filigree, and cut them up
Mm.
and incorporate them. So long as it was pure copper or pure silver, etc. Because with some of the mixed metals, you don't know how it's going to outgas in the kiln, and you don't want to do anything that is dangerous. So that's why, and also you can put organic material. I've just started doing experiments because I've learned about this. You can take things like leaves and or other organic material. They will burn out, but they will leave a trace of what they were.
Oh, like a
So
fossil.
exactly. So there's
Wow.
amazing things you can do. So you can try, and you can use different metal meshes. So like pieces of screen. But I like the idea of using organic materials and sandwiching them. Now, if you just them in the kiln with no glass over it, they'll just they'll disintegrate completely.
Okay.
But
That
if
makes
you
sense.
sandwich them, and people could do this at home, actually, if they had a kiln, you can do it with what we call float glass, which is window glass. So
Mm-hmm.
you can use plain glass, and just there's an artist that I was introduced to in the last year, working in South America. She only uses, because where she's located, it's very expensive to get things like bullseye glass. She uses all window glass, and does these layers with all these different materials in the glass.
Wow.
And so it's absolutely fascinating what you can do.
I was thinking it might be, unless you knew the source of your window glass, it could be a problem.
Yeah, that you would have to look. I mean, you wouldn't want to use safety glass because that has something else laminated in between.
Okay.
But just plain, what they call float glass, because it's the way it's manufactured. It's floated on a liquid metal surface, I think, to make it really clear. But regular window glass is quite inexpensive, and so long as you fuse it to each other, that's one of the things. In my work, I only use bullseye glass with bullseye glass because I know it's compatible, what they call
Yeah.
compatible.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want, and that is COA, which is coefficient of expansion 90, whereas there are other glasses that people use that are coefficient of expansion 96 or 104, and you don't want to mix different suppliers, different coefficient of expansion together, because that's when you can have explosions in the kiln, you can have things break, you can have all kinds of unusual things happen
Yeah.
when it's not compatible.
That makes sense. You know, I'm uh, inspired by, you've had tremendous personal challenges in your life, yet you still create, through your husband's illness and
Yeah.
passing. How has that shaped your work? And if you could maybe speak to that to others who are going through some challenging times and still trying to create, how did you
I
navigate all that?
It was very difficult because, of course, I was working full time at the same time. Um, what I would recommend, even if you can just sketch, I keep sketchbooks all around. And I'm sorry I didn't. It's in the other room, but just doodling, just sketching what's around you, or just sketching abstractions. I find that to keep yourself doing creative activities, and then when you can schedule the time for yourself to do a project or to do something, whether it's painting or with glass or other materials, and I do work in a number of other materials besides glass, I would say you need to keep nourishing yourself with whatever else is going on in your life. Like I just did, and I've sent you the pictures, 2 new discs over the Thanksgiving holiday, the week, and one of which is a 20-inch diameter, temporarily called Red Orange Flame, which I designed to be a tabletop because I do tabletops. So it's over a 1/2 inch thick and it's 20 inches in diameter. So schedule the time to be creative, to do projects. And when you can't, just keep sketch pads around and do something. That I find is it's like meditation. If you schedule a little bit of meditation in your day, that can be tremendously beneficial.
Well, and I know that, once things started to calm down a little bit, you started to get your work out there and do shows. How did you make that transition from not to showing again?
Well, the interesting thing was in 2016, which was the year before my husband became ill, I was actually then preparing to start showing my work because a friend of ours had seen the first tabletop that I had done. And I'd actually done it in a workshop at Bullseye. But I had 3 layers of color with clear in between. So the tabletop was actually 1 inch thick, about 15 by 18 inches. It's on my website. And it weighed 25 pounds. But that tabletop, when I showed it to Kathy, she looked at it and said, she's here in the Bay Area. She said, a high-end interior designer will pay $5,000 or $10,000 for that.
Wow.
And I looked and I said, really? And so that got me thinking, because I'd been more interested in just exploring all the different ways you could use glass and taking workshops with visiting artists and different things. And at that point, I started thinking about it, and I was just getting ready to apply to shows. And then I had the company I was with for a long time was purchased by another company, so there was a transition there. And then, unfortunately, my wonderful husband, Christopher, became seriously ill in early 2017. So basically, a lot of things got postponed. And after he passed in 2020, it was in the beginning of the pandemic. And I started looking around and saying, well, maybe I could make a business out of this. So see how we can look at that. And I was looking to move into another, for my day job, working to go into a different field, which I ended up doing. But then I really started looking into, well, where do you want to show things? And with glass, I discovered you really need people to see it in person. Yeah. And just this last summer in 2025, I was in 4 juried art festivals here in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I sold several of my signature pieces, which are my discs and tables, and a number of the slumped pieces, which are more functional work that I make as well. Yes. So, and
congratulations.
Thank you. It was given that they sell for several $1,000s a piece. It was because it doesn't make a business. I discovered, again, with my business background, I realized there are some artists who either they're retired or they don't really need to make a business out of it. They're just looking to cover their costs of the materials. But I really encourage people to really price your work, yes, that values you as an artist, that values the work and the vision and the creativity that you put into it. That's really important to educate the art buying public, and to make sure that it is valued the way it should be.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, I'm with you, sister. if somebody, and you talked about how to get started, if somebody uh, didn't have them in the area,
Mhm.
but there are places that they can go.
Yeah.
Are there small kilns that people can buy for for home
Oh, yes.
use or?
Yes, definitely. And it still will cost over $1,000 for a good small kiln. But there are also, when you learn about this, you can also get used equipment. You
Mm,
don't have to buy new. I hear from friends about, that again, they're people who they are closing their studio, or they're whatever, or they're moving, and just look around at the various sites where you buy used things, whether it's eBay or elsewhere. And so there's that capability, but you basically want to take classes or take workshops to find out if this is something you enjoy doing. And very often the glass studios that give workshops, they also do what Bullseye does, which is open studios. So you can work on your own projects and fire them in their kilns and use their cold working shop. So you don't have to have the equipment at home. You can do it at their facilities. And there's lots of them all around the country. It just look up Glass Studio or Fuse Glass Art, and you'll find and also go to art open studios in your area. I know here in the Bay Area, we have multiple times a year in different areas of the Bay Area. They have open studios, so you can visit other artists and ask them, do you have kilns at home? Where do you work? How did you learn? And just see what your local resources are. Because and oftentimes there will be people that have kilns at home, and maybe they'd be willing to share. They're willing to, so the community. Okay, I've been studying, I mentioned, with Narcissus Qualiata, who's an amazing, he's in his early 80s, still going strong. And he started teaching online during the pandemic. His daughter, one of his daughters happens to be an internationally known documentary filmmaker. So she filmed a lot of his experiments and everything for the courses. But he wanted to transmit his knowledge of glass and glass art and fused glass, particularly, to others. And he did that. And he also, once he completed this 6 courses that a number of us took, we all wanted to have a community. So he created an online community, which we have a Facebook group, and we have coaches. It's all by subscription. Is coaches, and we meet several times a week. It's all recorded, so if you can't attend live, but Q&A. So basically, he's created an extraordinary community online. But so I encourage people to look for their local art leagues, art associations, and see who's giving workshops so that you can experiment.
Yeah, the local art organizations are a fantastic resource, as are arts councils for various counties.
Yes.
So yes, I would encourage people to do that as well. So wow, I'm totally inspired. Want to go find something where I can go play. So how can people find you online? Where will they find you?
My website is carolinemasters.com, so just my name.com. And so a lot of my glass work is there, and of course how to contact me. And you can of course sign up for my newsletter. So I occasionally send out a newsletter with talking about new work and where I'll be showing. So that's there. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook, and the links are on my website to that. I haven't been as active as I'd like. Again, it all takes time.
Yes.
To be active, and I found I'm very active in the private glass groups and things that I'm in. And I will be posting more on Instagram and Facebook.
You can only do so much, and
Yes.
so I focus my efforts where I can, and then you got to let the rest go.
Exactly. And I know you're dealing with some difficult challenges as well, and as they say, life is what happens while you're busy making other plans.
Yes. Yes. Totally. Well, this is another wrap of the Painterly Life podcast. Thank you, Caroline. I really am inspired. I want to go take a class somewhere.
Good.
And I know we've got a local fused glass artist in our local art group, so I will check in with her.
Oh, definitely do that, because she'll know all the resources.
Oh, it'll be fun. Well, thanks for tuning in, everybody. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and share so that I can bring more inspiration to you. That's a wrap. We'll see you next time.